All right, so just a little background for those of you about why we're doing the Voices of the Lenape. The Voices of the Lenape were exist as a symposium and as an event today because as part of the Newark 350 celebration, as you all know, it's 350 years that Newark, New Jersey has existed as it does under that name. And so as part of the celebration, we wanted to make sure that the original inhabitants of the region and of this location were included, and that would be us, the Lenape people. There are still Lenape people living and working and residing in Newark and have been doing so for quite some time. And that's part of the story that we hope to share in this symposium. All right, so what you're looking at, just to make sure the visuals have some impact and some usefulness, what you're looking at are the political and physical geographies of the North American continent. And you'll see that the green region is the northeastern woodlands. And that's defined by the fact that, it is a woodlands, and it incorporates parts of southern Canada, as well as all the way down to what is referred to as currently the mid-Atlantic states. And then there's the southeastern woodlands, the plains, the Great Basin, and the Southwest. These are important distinctions. People respond to their geographies. How they interact with the environment creates a cultural mindset and also an economic context for how people communicate and interact with each other and their natural environments. And the northeastern woodlands is said to exist because of the way that indigenous people interacted with their environment. You'll see in the other map, and I hope that the language is visible to you. It's a very local map. It's a map of New Jersey, nearby Pennsylvania, all the way down to what is today Maryland, Connecticut, and New Jersey is highlighted. And you see the two words, Lenni Lenape, right? Lenni Lenape. That's the name of the broader Algonquin-speaking group that inhabited and still inhabits much of this region today. Like many of the nations, Lenape people have been dislocated in the sense that they've been removed from part of their ancestral lands, but not everyone has. So I wanted to provide a visual context and a geographic context of who we are and where we are as representatives of the voices of the Lenape here in Newark. Okay? So this is a very old map.
Very old.
And reason why I'm showing you Connecticut, you're like, all right, so she just talked about New Jersey. Why is she talking about Connecticut? There's nothing wrong with Connecticut, by the way. But one of the things that's true is that these are European borders. Right? Indigenous people lived on the land, and we didn't have the same types of notions of bordering that the colonials did. That was a European context. Everybody was fighting their 300-year war over where boundaries should be in one location versus another, and many of those wars continue today, as we know. So the Connecticut map places the Lenape in regions also north of what we consider to be Newark, New Jersey today. And in fact, on this particular map, in the region that is next to New York State, right, we're in the tri-state region, the New York-Connecticut border, that's a border where Ramapough also resided, Ramapough Lenape people. But Lenape were all through Connecticut. We were part of the Western Connecticut Confederation, and we know that because of the tribes with whom we interacted. And many of them were Southern New England Nations people, as well as what are now New York Nations people and First Nations people in Canada. So we have direct relatives that live in Canada as well. So these political borders are truly borders. If you're Mohegan, you're probably straddling the border between Canada and the United States, right? If you're Mohawk, you definitely are. So these are borders that exist as a function of colonization, but they become important in the storytelling of why and how Lenape view themselves, their own identities, but also a part of the identity discourse that happens outside of us as a community. So one of the things that this map shows is that the Ramapough had a sachem, an active sachem, right on what is referred to as the New York, New Jersey border, along with the Connecticut border. And these villages and these sachems existed in a way that defy Euro constructions of what it means to be a ruler or a leader, right? So sachems were really fires, and it might be that one community gets to a certain size and people decide, you know what, our community is getting too large. We are going to exhaust the natural resources here. So by decision, communities separated so they could take full advantage of the natural resources but protect those resources. Because when you live off the land, you need to protect the land. So this seems very common sense in the current day and age, right? So much of the natural technology of what defined the northeastern woodlands was a function of the way the woodlands were actually treated and cultivated by indigenous people. That's why we find stands of birch, stands of oak, stands of elm. Although ash you almost can't find anymore, right? So we have lost some of our northern woodlands to a great extent, unfortunately, in the Northeast. So, as you know, by the mid-1600s, Newark was being, quote-unquote, purchased from the Lenni Lenape that were living here. And the concept of purchasing land is not understood by indigenous people historically or even today, quite frankly, in the way that the Euros did. But as you can see from the slide, Katona, who was the sachem that had that was running the fire in nearby Connecticut, pressed westward into the New York, New Jersey highlands, into what is now known as the Ramapough Mountains. And the Ramapough Mountains were named for the Ramapough Indians. So when you go into the historical records of Connecticut, and you go into the historical records of New York, you go into the historical records of New Jersey and other places, you see the name Ramapough. And when you speak to the elders who keep the history of nearby nations and tribes, they tell you the stories of the Ramapough. The Lenni Lenape were referred to as the grandfather nation. And sometimes would serve in that role in settling disputes that could not be settled by lacrosse. So we migrated west as a matter of survival and hid out in those mountains for an extended period of time. And so that part of the Appalachia that makes up the Highlands region, that is the Ramapough Mountains, that's where our father and other of our ancestors went during this time of displacement from our ancestral lands that were here, as well as in Manhattan and other places. So these are Trail of Heartaches or Trail of Tears. This is interesting. I think, one of the things that when I listen to the news and I listen to what's going on in Syria and other parts of the world about the displacement of people, the movement of people, and more importantly, the conditions of that movement, I have a real connection with them. All of the Eastern nations were moved out. If they weren't actually destroyed by disease or other genocidal acts, starvation, what have you, then they were displaced. You had the option of walking from here to Oklahoma, right? I did say walking from here to Oklahoma, or walking from here to somewhere else, based on where the government wanted you to go. So you can see from the map behind me this red line. And this red line shows several migrations westward of Lenape people. So you have Lenni Lenape nations in Idaho. You have Lenni Lenape nations, you have 3 of them right here in New Jersey today. You have them in New York, you have them in Canada, you have them in Oklahoma, you have them all over the United States. Lenape started their long walk, and as many other nations would tell you, some of us are still walking. Right, so this is significant to the story, because the notion that everybody left is probably not a good one to retain. Right, not everybody decides I'm going to be pushed out of my homeland. So there were those that walked, but then there were those that stayed, right? And this is the story of some of those that stayed.
Yes.
So Lenni Lenape found their refuge in the highlands of New Jersey. Now, the highlands of New Jersey, if you were on the Parkway going north, right, you would arrive very, very quickly at the highlands of New Jersey. And there you will find the office of the Ramapough Lenape Nation. And you would also find members of the Ramapough Lenape tribe. These are our immediate relatives, and they stayed there on this mountain, oh my goodness, for generations. When you look at gravestones, and you look at the names on the gravestones, there are 4 Smithsonian registered names of the tribe: De Freece, De Groot, Van Dunk, and Maan. And of course, these are Dutch names for a reason, right? So we carry those colonial names because it was the Dutch, the folks from the Netherlands, who actually controlled much of this region initially before the British came in and took over. And so this is an important part of the story. So how do people, hide? It's very easy. The majority of the Euros coming over, they were land clearers, right? They wanted to have gardens, they wanted to have estates, they wanted to build cities. They were, people forget, in the European context, they were coming from religious abuse, separation and segregation, the worst ghettos in the world. I mean, their ghettos are older. I mean, what we call a ghetto, which is a Jewish word and has a whole different historical context, but what they consider to be slums are thousands of years old. Right? So they're coming here seeking a lot of things, a lot of newness and opportunity. Unfortunately, we were here. And the only reason why that is unfortunate is because the rush of immigration to the United States had such a devastating impact on our population. Because there were a lot of diseases and a lot of other things that came along, intentionally or unintentionally, and some of them were invasive species. I mean, a good portion, people forget that just 10,000, 12,000 years ago, all of this was under a glacier, right? So something like worms. Worms are not indigenous. Worms are not indigenous. The colonials brought them. They brought a lot of things. English ivy is called English ivy for a reason. Right? And unfortunately, that invasiveness traveled with the colonials. When I go to conferences, I always do community service at the conferences that I attend. I won't attend a conference unless they do have a community service component. And when I was out in Oregon, they are losing their forests because of English ivy. The English ivy chokes the trees. And so I went into the forest and spent a couple of days with other educators cutting out English ivy and stacking it. And if it wasn't burned, then the artists would come in, take the ivy. And what they did when you would go down in downtown Portland is you would see they would take wire structures, create these sculptures, and then use the English ivy on the structure as a way to utilize it. So the notion of what's local community today has expanded. But one of the things that's true about the Highlands is it represented a portion of the region where there wasn't a lot of settlement activity, right? The whole purpose was not to settle there. The Highlands became important for their iron and for their coal and a variety of other things which the Revolutionary Army needed, among other folks, but the point wasn't to settle it. So our ancestors, where we find our historic graves when we go to visit them or walk by them, they carry these four names, and these are the names of our immediate relatives in the tribe. So place name, Mawa. Mawa is Algonquin. It's the meeting place. And as you can see from this map, it's in the Highlands, right? So the surrounding communities are Hilburn on the other side of the border, New York. You have Ramsey, you have boy, I can't, just a Ringwood. Ringwood is significant. That's where we have our powwows. We've been having powwows there for a number of years.